Right, I'm looking at the Tefifon system again, but this time, hopefully, it's going to be in stereo. I've got the KC4 stereo model here, and if you remember from a previous video where I showed this, it isn't working very well, if at all. The cartridge that's in it, the stylus, has died. Now, I thought that was the end of that until a nice chap called Markus got in touch with me. As you might remember from the previous video, he sent me over some spares and accessories. I was able to play the 3-minute Kurz band, which was the Tefi's answer to the single. This time, I've got a replacement pickup cartridge for my KC4. And I've got the other kind of cartridge that I'll need, which is the Tefi cart in stereo. Now, this is incredibly rare because there were only 5 titles came out in stereo, and yet there were an awful lot more machines that could play stereo. These KC4 models, they were all stereo capable. They came out in 1961, and they sold about 5,000 of these. The KC1, which came out in 1956, that wasn't a stereo model. However, later on, there were quite a few of them that came with a stereo cartridge in them. They were primarily the ones built into a console system, along with a radio and all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot more stereo KC1s out, 17,000 approximately stereo KC1s, 5,000 KC4s, 5 cartridges, and one of those was a demo cart. So there were only 4 stereo carts that were sold to the public. Markus has been kind enough to send me one over, and what we're going to do now, we're going to see if we can get my old machine to play in stereo. So let's get on with that. Right, so I've got everything that I need here. Let's just hope that I can get this to work. So first off, let's get inside the top of this. Okay, now if you saw my previous video that featured this device, you might remember me mentioning how I wasn't impressed with the way it handled the stylus compared to the other older device I've got. With this one, when you turn it on, it moves the stylus straight in and it slams in on the ribbon. Whereas the other device, you turn on the power, which starts the motor going, but then you lower the stylus and it has a nice dampened movement. Well, this one isn't supposed to slam it in. Apparently, there's a mechanism here which has a tendency to get stuck. I think everything here has also got a bit bent. Okay, so I'll turn it on here. Now at this point, that stylus is supposed to be held off the ribbon. It's definitely been bent in too close, but it doesn't matter, the whole mechanism has been replaced anyway. But just imagine, at the moment, that is being held off the ribbon, so then you just push this to the left, and it drops it in. Now the way that that works, there's a section here that's held back until I push that to the left, and that is the stylus dropping in. So it's not really slamming it all the way in from back here. At this point, it's held off the ribbon, and then that just drops it down the last millimetre or so. But of course, on this one, it's not happening quite as intended. So my first job is to clean this section here and then lubricate it to make sure this mechanism works perfectly every time. Right, well, that's everything cleaned up. So I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of oil in all these sections. Okay, so everything here is moving freely now. This is springing back into place. It was getting stuck occasionally before, and this whole mechanism seems to be working perfectly every time. So let's move on to try and replace this cartridge. Okay, now this looks rather complicated. Here is the cartridge, but it isn't just this section here. It's on this piece of plastic which travels up and down this pole here, but not only that, it also interacts with this part here, which has a counterbalance on it, and also the marker that appears through the window on the top to tell you how far you are through the cartridge. Off the back of the pickup cartridge here, we've got 3 wires coming out onto this board here, at which point they exit through thicker wires through the back of the case. And somehow I've also got to keep these 2 things linked together. But back in the day, you wouldn't have to swap this whole thing out. You just need to swap out the stylus. I believe if you just push the stylus back like so, then it could be removed with a pair of tweezers. If I could get that off there, we'll see. There we go. But that's no good to us now because putting a new stylus into this cartridge is not going to help anything. The cartridge itself has died. So let's just see how this all comes apart. Now, I do have the service manual for what good it's going to do me, because whilst it was in German and I've translated it, it is just a little bit of text. It's just these 4 pages here, which don't tell you very much at all. They don't tell you really how to replace anything on here. It just tells you the specs more than anything else. So I'm going to have to figure this one out on my own. Right, I think it's best if I have a look inside this box of spares to see exactly what I've got here. Ah, right, it is the whole metal assembly. That might make things an awful lot easier, because then we're just replacing this whole part. So that'll unscrew from there. Now I've got to be careful with this because the stylus is on the end there. Notice how it's bent back on this one, which explains why the one I've got is slamming into the tape, because it actually goes back from the front of this rather than sticking out. Right, well, at least this means I don't have to solder these little tiny wires because they're already soldered on there. I just have to attach the large ones at the other end here. Right, so I think I'm going to be undoing this bolt here. We've got one on this plate which goes through to the other side, but on here that's bolted onto this bracket. So let's try undoing that first of all. Right, well, that's out of there, so let's see how these two halves come apart. It certainly seems like this part has to come out first, but I don't know how to... Ah, there we are. Right, we've got it. Right, so you have to be careful with this little bit of metal here when it's going back in. That looks bent, but I think it's probably supposed to be. But hold on, we've got a spare one of these anyway, haven't we? Right, let's just move that to one side, and then we'll have a look at this thing here. So this just pulls off forward like that. Okay, so that's the one we're taking out, and this is the replacement. And the first thing I've noticed is that metal pin there is definitely bent the other way on the old one, which no doubt was causing a bit of an issue. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is make sure the peg that this goes onto is nice and clean, because it's supposed to pivot freely. Let's just have a look at that. Right, so it's this bit at the back here. Yeah, that looks okay. Nothing on there. Nice and clean. Right, just pop this back on again, and let's start working on getting this stylus, or cartridge I should say, off these wires. Okay, so this is the part we're going to desolder at these 3 points here. We've got a stereo cable coming out of here, a common ground down the middle, and then left and right either side. But something I've noticed about this, see this cable here that goes from the ground to one of these pins here, for no other reason than to ground this whole section. Because if we look at this one here, the replacement doesn't have that. So I'm not going to replicate that. I don't know why someone's done that. Maybe they're trying to get rid of a hum, who knows. But I'm just going to swap those 3 wires into these 3 positions here, and hopefully that's all I need to do. Okay, well, without applying the power, let's just turn it on to check the mechanism's working. So we turn it on here. This enables us to bring the stylus up and down to position it on the ribbon, and then we can push it in, which would then push it in against the ribbon, and it will be playing now. And then we could bring it off and move it up and down, move it back in again, and then turn it off. So yeah, that all looks fine to me. We haven't finished yet though. This rubber wheel is absolutely knackered. It's falling to pieces. Fortunately, Markus has sent me some spares, and this is what we need. Now this here, I believe, would go over this section. We'd take the top off that and stretch this around the centre. I don't know whether to do that. Perhaps it's a good idea. Yeah, maybe we'll do that in a moment. We'll see if we can get that clip off the top. But we'll start with this one here. Right, so it's one of those little clips that we just need to prise off. There we go. And we should now be able to lift this top section up. I notice there's a washer there as well, so I don't want to lose that. We'll put that to one side. Right, so now we need to take this off here. Yeah, this is perhaps going to need cleaning after I remove it. Right, now it does look like that was glue, but I don't think I'm going to stick this to the top. I think I'll just put it on the centre part and then pop it back on again. It's going to hold together just fine like that. Now again, as we've got this out here, we might as well clean it. Put our new wheel back on the top. That spins nicely. Plastic washer, and then the little clip over the top. Right, that one seems fine. Let's have a look at this other one. Yes, this one's a bit different because it's a metal wheel but with a rubber band around it. I don't know whether just to clean it or stick one of these new ones on it. Let's take the clip off and have a look. I think I might just try cleaning that one for the moment. I don't want to risk damaging anything that doesn't actually need replacing right now. I've cleaned it off as best as I can. Still very grippy, so no need to swap that out. I'll just put a little bit of oil on here after cleaning this and then put it back in place. I'm going to give this thing a good clean because it's in a bit of a mess. Now, whilst this is not a record player, the principle in use here is exactly the same. We've got a stylus that moves around inside a groove. That then generates the audio that you're listening to, and it comes out of the back of the case here through these wires. Now, you don't often see it as simply laid out as this in a record player because they'd hide away the cartridge underneath the tone arm. The wiring would be inside the base somewhere, but here you can see the straight line that goes all the way through from the stylus here on the right. So the movement of the stylus inside the groove is generating electricity inside this cartridge here. Just the movement of it, electricity then comes out of the back here through these three wires. And those three wires then just go out through these three wires in the back of the case. And that's it. That's as simple as it needs to be. Right, that's looking a lot cleaner. There was some muck in there that I think must have been from tobacco smoke, but I managed to get it off with a bit of WD-40. So let's just pop this back in here, make sure everything lines up. Okay, I'm going to try this cartridge. I played this just this morning. It was working fine on the other machine. So let's just listen to a mono one first before we get too carried away and see if this generates any sound at all. Okay, a bit of bad news, I'm afraid, but with a silver lining perhaps. The new old stock cartridge assembler that I've put on this is very old new old stock. I mean, it's like 60 years old, and as a result, age hasn't been kind to it. Even though it's been sitting in a box doing nothing, I think what's happened, the rubber mounts on it have hardened up over time, and as a result, it's producing a very low level output. It's so quiet, I have to turn my speakers all the way up to be able to hear it. Now, this is not a cartridge that's supposed to go through a phono stage. It's a ceramic cartridge, so it's just supposed to produce a line level output that you put into a regular amplifier. In fact, if you put it through a phono stage, you just get a load of buzz and hum. What I've done though, I've recorded it into my PCM recorder at the loudest input level that I can without it distorting, and then I've got that still very quiet signal, put it into this editing package, boosted it up, and that's what you're about to hear now. Now bear in mind, we've got signal to noise ratio issues here. You can hear the motor in the background, there's a hum and things, but still you're able to hear a Stereo Tefi car. It isn't sounding like it should have done, but you can still hear it. So let's have a listen. Okay, so not quite the result we wanted there. However, I'm sure you could hear that it was in stereo, and whilst the quality isn't what it should be, now, after this video comes out, perhaps 150,000 people or so will have heard a Stereo Tefi cart being played. And I suspect that's more people than ever heard one being played when these things were available to buy in the shops in the late 1950s into the early 60s. Now, amongst the spares that Markus sent across were these rubber feet. And I'll show you where they go on this particular machine, because by the time they were making this KC4 model, there was clearly a lack of attention to detail going on at the Tefi company. Things weren't going so well. So those are your rubber feet there, and the cartridge sits on top of them like so. On the original KC1 model, there was a big rubber mat under here, but they've just put these feet there. All seems fine so far. However, if you get one of these 18-minute cartridges that came out the year before this model, and try and put one of those on here, you'll see the cartridge is falling between the rubber feet. Markus believes that they should have put the two at that end and the one at that end, and somehow it got mixed up on the plans, and the fact that nobody noticed it before the models went out is a bit of a demonstration as to what was going wrong at the time. And just watch what happens when I try and play this one. Yeah. This little cartridge doesn't play very well on anything at all though, but especially not on this machine where it doesn't even hold it in place. The problem with them is they're too lightweight, and the tape being pulled out of them tends to move them around a bit, so it's a bad design. This one won't play even on my other machine, and as you can see now, the tape's got itself a little bit bunched up. A lot of people wanted me to play this one because it had Striptease Susie on it. Well, trust me, there's no visuals with these cartridges, they're purely audio, and when it comes to this particular cartridge, you're not even going to be able to hear the audio because it doesn't get pulled through properly. But, as some people pointed out, you can see a video for Striptease Susie on YouTube, and it's not the most entertaining song ever. Now, just a little bit of extra information here. You might have heard a Tefi cart being played unwittingly when you were younger. If you're around about my age, I think I heard one being played, and I didn't know until more recently. There was a device called a bimbo box. It was an arcade cabinet that you put money in, and inside it were a load of animatronic monkeys, like a monkey band. And it played music, and the monkeys played drums and guitars, all that kind of stuff. If you search on YouTube for bimbo box, you'll see loads of these things being played. Now, those were made in West Germany. These things made their way all across the world, and originally they came with a Tefi cart inside them that played the music. And I distinctly remember being at the seaside as a child and seeing one of these things, putting money in it and watching this band. I think I thought it was a bit rubbish at the time. However, I do remember it. So I think I probably heard a Tefi cart being played all the way back in the late 1970s. Now, I feel like I've covered all that I want to about the Tefifon system for the moment, so some of you will be glad to know that this is the last video on the subject for the foreseeable. I'm not saying I won't do another video at any point in the future, but I've got nothing planned. But while we've got this end bit to wrap things up, let's just clear off a few things that perhaps have arisen throughout the course of the last few videos, and some questions that people have raised. One of which was when I held this cartridge aloft in the previous video, I said that on the earlier high-speed Tefifon system, cartridges of this size are easy to identify that they're for that system because they're black with a red label, which prompted some people to say, well, why is that one cream then? Well, I showed this in the second video, but that was 9 years ago. This is a 4-hour cartridge. This is for this system here. So just to recap, originally there was the higher speed Tefifon system. All the cartridges were this size and held up to 60 minutes worth of audio. But then when they came out with the slower speed system, they reused this cartridge design, but it's in a cream colour, and now this could hold up to 4 hours worth of audio. Now, when I saw these for sale all those years ago, I picked this one up and I thought, oh, all the large cartridges must be 4 hours. It turns out that this one is one of only 4 titles that came out with 4 hours worth of music on it. You might see large cartridges in this cream colour for the slower speed system, but they don't all hold 4 hours worth of music. So this is a rare cartridge that I managed to pick up without really realising it. You can understand why 4-hour cartridges are rare. They were very expensive, but also trying to get 4 hours worth of music together to put on one is a bit of a problem. So yeah, there were only 4 titles in the slower speed system in this cream colour with 4 hours worth of audio in them. Now, another question that a lot of people asked is, they said, how were they made? They want to know how you make a Tefi cart. Well, Again, I'm not really qualified to explain this one. Markus showed me a picture and I'll put it on the screen now. And I think the simplest thing to say is there's a lot of parts to the process. What I'd suggest to anyone asking that question, look how a vinyl record's made. And then just imagine all those processes going into this. Instead of a metal stamper, a long metal tape that prints onto the plastic. I think that's perhaps the simplest way that I could describe it. And there's still bits of the puzzle that have been put together about the Tefi system. On Adam Savage's channel, Tested, back in January, he featured a Tefi player on there, and he was kind enough to link back to my videos on the channel. And the machine that they showed there, picked up in a second-hand shop in the US, was branded up as Audio Master. We weren't aware that Audio Master ever branded KC1 and sold them in the US. Another thing Markus showed me was a car player based on the KC1 with additional springs to stop the thing getting jostled about in a car. And I think it would make a good car player. Again, just think, so late 1950s, you've got your car audio. Now, quite often people point out the record players for cars to me. They always show that picture of Muhammad Ali with his record player in his car, and the Beatles as well, they had them. But yeah, the KC1 I've already showed you. Just imagine that with some springs on it to stop it getting jostled about. Hope you enjoyed having a look at this stereo player and having a listen to it, even if it wasn't the best reproduction. At least you've heard it now. So I think that's it for the Tefi for the moment. What I should do, I should play some Tefi music over the end credits like I did before. Some people are saying, aren't there any titles with vocals on them? I'll see what I can find. I'm playing you the good ones. Some of these carts have got creases in them, some are full of crackles, some just don't drag through the cartridge properly. They don't sound right, the speed's all off. So I've got a limited selection from all the carts I've got that play really well and sound nice on the videos. But I'll try and find another track which doesn't hit a content match, because there was one on that stereo one, was the theme from The Third Man, so that would hit a content match. But anyway, yeah, here's another Tefi track, but that is it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
Wenn auf dem Mond jemand wohnt, sieht wenn es will, unsere Erde bei Nacht dann und wann. Sieht dann, was ein liebendes Paar auf der Erde so macht, wenn sieht, was geschieht. Wünscht sich bei uns auf der Erde zu sein, denn wohnt auf dem Mond und ist dort jedes Mondjahr allein. Ja, ich weiß, wie es ist, wenn du mich voller Zärtlichkeit küsst. Auf der Welt sind wir zwei, doch den Mond haben wir gern dabei. Wenn auf dem Mond jemand wohnt, sieht wenn es will, unsere Erde bei Nacht dann und wann.